Lesson 109, A Course in Miracles, the workbook. Have you been doing these lessons with us or apart? Matters not. One lesson taken today or all the lessons taken over 365 days. However, you come to God, come to miracles, come to the experience of what is promised here in this workbook. That's the way for you. Could you rest in God and let yourself be unshaken by the appearances in the world? Today, this is what we do. We rest in God. I rest in God. You rest in God. We all rest in God, and we are safe and happy in our rest. Could you allow yourself to rest in God today? This is lesson 109. We ask for rest today. We ask for quietness, unshaken by the world's appearances. We ask for peace and stillness in the midst of all the turmoil born of clashing dreams. We ask for safety and for happiness, although we seem to look on danger and on sorrow. And we have the thought that will answer our asking with what we request. I rest in God. Now, for this lesson today, let's see. Could it be? Could we rest in God? Will you rest in God? We'll go through and we'll see if anything's shaking our rest. Just have an opportunity to let it go. And we'll see if there's any resistance to this rest, what it comes up, any darkness that would disturb us or have us our light veiled. Today, we'll just make the choice to rest in God and see what comes up that might disturb our rest and let it go. I rest in God, lesson 109, the Course in Miracles workbook. Let's begin. I rest in God. I rest in God. This thought will bring you to the rest and quiet, peace and stillness, and the safety and happiness you seek. I rest in God. Could you allow yourself some rest? Could you open up and allow this thought to have your focus? I rest in God. Would you ask for rest today and rest in God? Could you allow this thought to carry you through? I rest in God, no matter what seems to be happening. You rest in God. Could it be? Could you surrender and rest in God? I rest in God. You rest in God. We ask for rest today. What could possibly take us from this beauty sleep, this resting in God? And you might notice there's some appearance, something you're thinking about that would disturb your rest and peace and stillness. And from your place of rest, could you simply just notice something that appears in the world other than your safety and the happiness that you seek? And in rest, could it be okay just to notice what would disturb your rest? Could you allow whatever comes up, whatever appearance, and just notice the feeling other than restfulness, stillness, and peace? And allow it, just aware of a passing emotion, just for now. Could you let all thoughts besides your rest in God pass by and notice this feeling that would disturb your rest? Let it unfold, unpack, and could you release that emotion? Would you release that emotion which would clash with your rest? When could you release and return to rest in God, free of the appearances of the world? I rest in God. I ask for rest today and quietness, peace and stillness. I rest in God. This is the day of peace. I rest in God while the world may seem in turmoil. My rest remains completely undisturbed. And you might notice there seems to be some kind of disturbance to your rest. Why would you not just be resting in God all the time? Well, there might seem something, an appearance, some kind of seeming pain or storm or strife or misery that would disturb your rest. And that's okay. As you rest in God, could you simply notice anything coming up for you, any unrest? And behind these thoughts, could you notice how it feels to be in unrest? Quite different from rest. Could you allow any sensation, vibration of unrest to just run? Could you allow it to run out, just feeling it, noticing it as you rest, just witnessing what would shake your slumber? And could you let go of this vibration of unrest and rest deeply and truly in God? Would you let go of this disturbance to your rest and rest in God? When could you let go and rest in God? And today, you rest in God. You ask for rest today, quietness, peace, stillness. The appearances of the world touch you not as you rest in God. I rest in God. Will you rest in God? Will I rest in God? Simply a choice to focus on this powerful thought as opposed to the thoughts of the strife in the world. So to come to a consistent rest in God, nothing to fear if there's some thought of strife, some care or concern or burden or anxiety. It can touch you not in your rest. Could you allow up anything that would shake you in your rest? Just noticing it, how it feels behind such thoughts of burdens or concerns, whatever comes up for you. And could you allow this energy to unstick, this cloud of darkness to move in your rest? As you rest, could you simply notice and let any energy that's unrestful run itself out, watching, resting? And could you surrender unrest to God and rest in Him? Would you surrender unrest to God and rest in Him? You never have to, it's just an option. When could you surrender unrest to God and rest in Him? I rest in God. This thought, this is the thought in which the Son of God is born again to recognize Himself. It's you. Will you allow this thought, I rest in God? Let this thought bring to you the rest and quiet, peace and stillness, and safety and the happiness you seek. I rest in God. I ask for rest today. And in this rest in God, in Him, no cares, no concerns, no burdens, no anxiety, no pain, no fear of future, and no past regrets. In timelessness, I rest. Could you allow your eyes to close and sink into the stillness and the rest in God? And is there any resisting this rest in God? Could you notice if anything at all comes up? You may just be at rest in God, and that's okay. Though, what would keep you from this state all the time? Is there any resisting? Just resting in God, being free of the appearances and cares of the world, completely undismayed. Is there any resistance to just resting in God? And that's okay. Could it be okay? Could you allow up anything that comes up to you for you that might be resisting your peaceful slumber, rest, quietness in God? And behind any thoughts about appearances in the world, any dismay or strife, could you allow those thoughts to pass by and notice any energy of unrest, any resistance to resting in God? Could you allow that energy to pass simply watching it as you rest? Noticing anything that would shake you from this rest, any resistance to this rest, could you simply allow it? And could you release any resistance, any unrest? It's just a choice. Would you release any resistance to resting in God? When could you release any resistance to resting in Him and allow yourself to rest in God? I rest in God. You rest in God. We rest in God. And this is all we ask for today. Could it be we ask for just this peace and stillness in the midst of all appearances of the world? Could we invite our brothers to this rest, choosing the thought, I rest in God, when others are caught in the appearances of the world? I rest in God. Could you allow resting in God? And is there any resistance? Perhaps you're resting in God quite content, quite holy, quite still. Though, has there ever been a time where there was some resistance to just resting in the perfect safety, peace, and happiness of God? Or is there something that would disturb your rest now? Any resistance to resting in God? And that's just something without judging or moralizing about it. Could you notice any resistance to your rest in God? Could you go behind the thought appearances and just notice any feeling, any vibration, Any darkness that's been hanging out or lingering, any resistance, could you feel what that feels like? Letting it be there. Nothing to change or fight or force, just witnessing any resistance to your rest in God. And could you let go of this resistance, if there is any? If it hasn't run out on its own, could you let it go? Would you let it go and accept your day of peace as you rest in God? When could you let it go and let rest in God be this day? I rest in God completely undismayed, carried through storms and strife, misery and pain, past loss and death. I rest and remain in the certainty of God. All problems solved, I rest in God. Peaceful today, I rest in God. In stillness today, I rest in God, reassured that the frantic fantasies of the world's appearances were but dreams that have passed away. I rest in God. Could you allow rest in God? Would you show our brothers rest in God that day of peace today? Is there anything at all that remains to disturb your rest? Any resistance to just being at rest in God today? And without making right or wrong of it, could you simply notice behind the thoughts what resisting rest in God feels like? No need to describe the feeling. Could you feel the feeling? Just surrendering it to God as you notice it, as you feel it, turning it over to God, to your rest in Him. Any resistance? Could you simply witness any resistance to your rest in God, surrendering anything that comes up, ignoring the thoughts other than I rest in God, feeling the vibration, the sensation of resisting your rest, just to allow it to run out, to pass. And could you surrender any resistance to resting in God? Give it up. Would you surrender and rest in Him? When could you surrender resistance to rest in God? Turn it over to Him and rest in Him. In this rest, the appearances of the world intrude on you not. Could you rest in God? Could the one request today be for rest? That's all. Today, we ask for rest in God and quietness unshaken by the world's appearances. When we ask for rest in God, we ask for peace and stillness in the midst of all the turmoil. When we ask for rest in God, we ask for safety and happiness, although there may appear danger and sorrow. We ask for rest in God and allow rest in God to bring the rest and quiet, peace, stillness, safety, and happiness that we seek. I rest in God. And could you take just a moment of rest in God? Could you allow yourself to rest in God? And could you release anything that would disturb your rest today? Surrender it to Him and rest in Him. Have the best day resting.